So given the convergence of a few other predictive programming warnings to the current time frame and the current position of the moon, I thought it would be worthwhile to re-examine this opening scene from iPet Go 2 and take a look at the astrosymbolism, which I think could be relevant to right around now. So obviously they're showing the pet goat here, but this scene has a lot of astrosymbolism, and I've explained in the past what I think that astrosymbolism is showing us here. So first of all, there's the title of the film, I Pet Goat 2. And if you look at this part of the sky where you have Gemini and Taurus and the constellations around there, you'll see that you have this constellation here called Camelopardalis. So the first part of the title is I, comma. So that's I think that comma there is not just some random thing. They put that intentionally there because that's a reference to Camelopardalis. And then the I is a biblical reference of the camel going through the eye of a needle, right? Eye. Because that's, Camelopardalis word or name starts with camel. And then pet goat is a reference to the constellation right below that, because that's the constellation Auriga, where the guy is holding this goat here. And then the 2 is a reference to Gemini, because you've got the twins, the Gemini twins. And, the symbol for Gemini is often just like a 2 like this. So I believe that's where the title I Pet Goat 2 comes from. It's just representing this sequence of constellations. And I drew this line here, this imaginary line, just to illustrate that. So then if you go back to that first scene, I used to think that these 6 lights up here referred to the first 6 full moons of 2024, but I think, obviously that's wrong. I think now what that refers to is, given that this scene puts the Auriga constellation front and center by, putting this pet goat here, I think these 6 lights are just sort of reinforcing that, because the Auriga constellation has 6 stars, or it consists of 6 stars. If you look at the Auriga constellation with this guy holding the goat, it's got this shape that it forms here, and that shape is formed out of 6 stars. Okay, this line here is not part of the Auriga constellation. That just happens to connect to it, but that's actually one of the horns of Taurus. But the Auriga constellation has these 6 stars forming this shape. So I think that these lights up here are just reinforcing the Auriga constellation association here. Okay, so this first scene here in I Pet Goat 2 is showing you that Auriga constellation with this pet goat. And then, as I've shown in the past, this part at the bottom here is actually depicting a few constellations, but the most obvious one is Pisces. Okay, so that's represented right here. It's also depicting Cetus and Cepheus, or Cepheus, however you pronounce it, and also the Lacerta constellation, which is the lizard. And I have a little picture that makes it easier to see that comparison. So right here on the top, it shows what's shown in that scene, and at the surface level, this is looks like a canine police officer holding a canine dog, but at the astrosymbolic level, that's not a dog. Okay, that's referring to this Lacerta lizard constellation. So you can see here that the most obvious constellation here is Pisces, because you've got this man's arm and his torso and leg perfectly matching the Pisces constellation, as you can see here. And Cetus, the whale constellation, is kind of the rest of his body. You've got the hat here, the head with the hat, and you've got this bent elbow here is represented right here, and then his feet are represented by this line. And so you've got the arm representing the Pisces rapturefish cord extending out, and then it continues with this leash here. The leash is not shown actually in the actual constellations, but you just have to imagine that eventually wraps around the neck of the lizard here, the Lacerta constellation. And so this lizard is actually at the end of the spear that Cepheus is holding. Okay, and that spear is represented by this break in the wood, because it's going right into the neck of this dog here, and then the spear here in the stars is going right into the neck of the lizard, which is easier to see if you go and open up Stellarium and zoom in. And that spear is obscuring the one of the legs of the lizard, which is why the same thing happens here. You know, this gap right here is obscuring one of the legs of this dog, making it kind of look like he has just 3 legs. So the same thing is happening down here. So putting this all together, let's go back to the full scene. And I'm going to go forward a little bit just to show you how they confirm some of this astrosymbolism. Because like I said, this is Auriga, and then this is Pisces. And so if you go forward a little bit, you see these 2 smokestacks in the back. Okay, so that's representing Gemini. So if you look in Stellarium, you know, you've got Pisces right here, and then you've got Auriga right here. And then behind Auriga, you've got, you know, behind Auriga and sort of to the left, you've got Gemini. And that's exactly what they're showing you here in this scene. You've got Pisces, and then you've got Auriga, the pet goat constellation. And then above that and sort of to the left, you've got the 2 smokestacks, you know, off in the distance here. So that's representing Gemini a little bit further down the ecliptic line. So that means right here at the beginning of the short film, they're showing you a part of the sky. And there's no point in showing you a part of the sky without showing some sort of planetary body to give you an idea of when they're referring to. Because, you know, a part of the sky is just a location, but you need to know, you know, what time they're referring to. And in order to do that, they have to show you something like the sun or the moon. And I think the one that they're actually showing us is the moon. And I think the moon is represented by this spotlight that's shining on the pet goat here. And I think it's the moon because it's dark out. So this can't be a reference to the sun or anything like that. So what they're showing us here is when the moon is in this part of the sky, between, let's say, this Pisces line and that other line that I showed you that was formed by that, you know, the title of this film that goes through Camelopardalis, Auriga, and Gemini. When the moon is between those 2 lines, then during those dates, some major event might happen. Which is interesting because if you take a look at the logo of the makers of iPetGo2, it's this firm called Heliofont. And in the O of Heliofont, you've got this, looks like some sort of astronomical alignment, maybe an eclipse or something. This guy on Twitter I found believes that it actually refers to when the sun is adjacent to the Regulus star, like this. Okay, so that's the logo, and this is the configuration. And so the reasoning that he gives is that the title of the makers of iPetGo2 is Heliofont, and Helio means sun, and then within Helio you've got Leo, and that Regulus star that the sun is adjacent to is in the constellation of Leo. So, I mean, it could be true. It sounds reasonable. But what's interesting is that actually just happened 2 days ago. You had the sun in this position adjacent to Regulus in Leo. You know, potentially matching what's shown in the Heliofont logo. Helio, sun, Leo, constellation. Regulus, sun. And if that's true, that's actually kind of amazing because on that date, I guess that was August 23rd or so, that's the exact date that the moon happens to cross that line that I was just talking about. Okay, so you see that the moon crosses that Pisces fish cord that's shown in the first scene of iPetGo2 right here. And so, like I explained earlier, this scene is showing the moon when it's in this zone between the Pisces cord and that imaginary line that I drew that intersects Auriga, the pet goat constellation, and Camelopardalis and Gemini. Okay, so that line would be kind of like right here. And here's the Pisces fish cord. So the moon is in that zone starting on, looks like 23rd of August, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, maybe going into the 29th. And yeah, that's amazing because that's what the iPet Go opening scene is showing us, and the moon just happens to enter that zone on the same date that the sun was adjacent to Leo, which is what potentially the Heliofont logo was showing us. So that would be a pretty amazing alignment there.